How often do you ponder over the social perception of prostitution in our society? It's a question that can lead us down a rabbit hole of diverse attitudes and beliefs. Prostitution, often labeled as the world's oldest profession, is a subject that has always sparked heated debates and controversy. Throughout the ages, societies have grappled with the concept of selling sex. It's a practice that has been alternately vilified and tolerated, hidden away and spotlighted. From the courtesans of ancient Greece to the geishas of Japan, the perception of prostitution has been shaped and reshaped by the norms and values of the time. In some societies, it's seen as a necessary evil. In others, a sinful indulgence. And in a few, it's simply another profession, regulated and protected by the law. These perceptions are as varied as they are complex, reflecting a myriad of cultural and historical influences. The perception of prostitution is a tangled web, woven through centuries of history and cultural influence. Prostitution, often called the world's oldest profession, has a long and complex history. This history begins in the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia, where sacred prostitution was practiced. In these early societies, sex work was not only accepted but also revered. Temples dedicated to fertility gods and goddesses often employed sacred prostitutes, who engaged in sexual rituals thought to bring prosperity and good fortune. From Mesopotamia, the practice spread to other ancient civilizations, including Greece and Rome. Here, the profession of prostitution was recognized and regulated. In Greece, for instance, hetairi, or high-class courtesans, often held high social status and were involved in intellectual and cultural events of the time. As we move into the medieval period, the perception of prostitution begins to shift. Influenced by religious and moral ideologies, prostitution was increasingly seen as sinful. However, it was also considered a necessary evil, providing an outlet for men's desires while protecting the virtue of other women. The advent of the modern era saw a further evolution in attitudes towards prostitution. The Victorian era in England, for example, was marked by a dichotomy. While prostitution was condemned on moral grounds, it was also rampant due to poverty and gender inequality. The 20th century brought about significant changes in the landscape of prostitution. From the legalization of the profession in parts of Nevada in the United States, to the rise of the sex workers' rights movement in the late 20th century, the perception and treatment of prostitution continued to fluctuate. This brief journey through the history of prostitution underscores the complex interplay of societal, economic, and moral factors that have shaped its evolution. It also highlights the resilience and adaptability of those who have found themselves in this line of work, often as a result of societal pressures and constraints. From ancient temples to modern streets, prostitution has been a part of human society for millennia. Despite changes in societal attitudes and legal frameworks, the profession persists, highlighting the enduring nature of this aspect of human behavior. Fast forward to today, and the landscape of prostitution has changed drastically. Technology has played a transformative role, with online platforms creating new avenues for sex work. These digital spaces offer a degree of anonymity and control, but they also come with their own unique challenges, such as digital exploitation and lack of physical safety. Globalization, too, has left its mark. It has fueled the mobility of sex work, but also exacerbated issues like human trafficking and exploitation. Prostitution today is a tapestry of experiences that vary widely across different regions and cultures. From high-class escorts in luxury apartments to street workers in impoverished neighborhoods, the diversity is staggering. Yet regardless of the context, many sex workers continue to face significant challenges, including legal persecution, societal stigma, and personal safety risks. In the digital age, the world of prostitution is as complex and varied as ever. Around the globe, countries grapple with the question of how to regulate prostitution. This is a complex issue with many facets, and every country approaches it differently. On one hand, we have countries like the Netherlands and Germany, where prostitution is legal and regulated. In these countries, sex work is treated like any other profession. Sex workers are required to register, pay taxes, and they have access to health services. This approach is built on the idea that by bringing the industry into the open, it can be better controlled and the rights of sex workers can be protected. Contrastingly, there are countries like Sweden, where the act of buying sex is criminalized but selling it is not. This model, often referred to as the Nordic model, aims to reduce demand for prostitution and ultimately to put an end to it. The idea is to protect the sex workers, who are often seen as victims, while penalizing the clients who are perceived as exploiters. Then there are countries where prostitution is entirely criminalized. In these places, both selling and buying sex are illegal. This approach is based on moral and social grounds, with the belief that prostitution is inherently harmful and degrading. But every approach has its pros and cons. Legalization and regulation can afford sex workers rights and protections, but it can also lead to an increase in demand, possibly inflating the industry. The Nordic model might reduce demand, but it can push the industry underground, making it harder to protect sex workers. And full criminalization often fails to curb the industry. Instead, it marginalizes sex workers and exposes them to increased risks. The arguments for and against each approach are as diverse as the countries that adopt them. Some argue for the rights and autonomy of sex workers, others focus on reducing harm, and still others aim to eradicate the industry altogether out of moral or social convictions. The question of how to regulate prostitution is fraught with controversy and no easy answers. As we continue to evolve our understanding of this industry, it becomes clear that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Each approach has its merits and drawbacks, and the best course of action may vary greatly depending on cultural, societal, and individual circumstances. Despite its prevalence, prostitution is shrouded in stigma and prejudice. That's the grim reality for sex workers across the globe. This stigma, often referred to as whorephobia, is deeply entrenched in society, and it's not just about disapproval or distaste. It's a systemic issue that can lead to discrimination, violence, and severe mental health issues for those involved in the industry. Sex workers, regardless of their reasons for entering the trade, often find themselves on the receiving end of societal scorn. This scorn can manifest in myriad ways, from overt discrimination and exclusion to more subtle forms of bias. It might mean being denied housing or other services, being subjected to derogatory comments, or even being refused help when they're in danger. This prejudice doesn't just come from society at large either. It can also come from within the legal system and law enforcement agencies themselves. In many places, sex workers are often more afraid of the police than they are of their clients. This fear is not unfounded, as there are numerous reports of sex workers being harassed, abused, or even assaulted by those who are supposed to protect them. The psychological toll of living under such constant strain is immense. Mental health issues among sex workers, including depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, are significantly higher than in the general population. The social isolation and fear of violence can also lead to substance abuse and addiction, further compounding their struggles. But this isn't just about individual suffering. The stigma and prejudice against sex workers have broader societal implications as well. It drives the industry further underground, making it harder for sex workers to seek help, and for authorities to regulate the trade effectively. It also contributes to the spread of sexually transmitted infections, as fear of discrimination can deter sex workers from seeking health care. In conclusion, the stigma surrounding sex workers isn't just about personal morals or beliefs. It's a pervasive issue with real-world consequences, affecting not just those in the industry but society at large. The stigma surrounding prostitution has dire consequences for those involved in the industry. It's time for a change, and that starts with understanding and empathy. As we look to the future, the question remains, what will become of prostitution? Let's delve into this topic and explore the potential trajectories. A significant direction that has been gaining momentum across the globe is decriminalization. This approach, lauded by some as the way forward, advocates for the removal of all laws against consensual adult sex work. Proponents argue that decriminalization would improve safety for sex workers, allowing them to operate openly, thus reducing the risk of violence and abuse. It's a perspective that has seen some success in New Zealand, where sex work has been decriminalized since 2003. A parallel course is the further legalization of prostitution. This model, already implemented in certain regions such as Nevada in the United States and parts of Europe, calls for strict regulation and oversight of the industry. Advocates of legalization maintain that it offers a pragmatic solution to manage an age-old profession, providing protection for sex workers and ensuring public health standards. But the road ahead is not without its bumps. One notable hurdle is the ongoing debate within feminism about sex work. While some feminists view prostitution as inherently exploitative, arguing that it objectifies women and reinforces patriarchal structures, Others see it as a legitimate form of labor. The latter group contends that sex work can be empowering, providing a means for individuals to take control of their bodies and livelihoods. This clash of perspectives adds a layer of complexity to the dialogue surrounding the future of prostitution. Technological advancements, too, will undoubtedly shape the industry's evolution. The rise of the internet has already transformed the dynamics of prostitution, birthing phenomena like online sex work. As technology continues to advance, it's plausible to expect further shifts in how the industry operates. While the future of prostitution is uncertain, one thing is clear: the conversation around it will continue to evolve. The discourse will persist, intertwining with broader societal debates about morality, autonomy, and the definition of work itself. As we move forward, the challenge will be to navigate this evolving landscape with empathy, understanding, and respect for the human rights of all involved.